Potlatch psychology. Modern knowledge attributes it to the natives of the Americas, but I believe it's a innate aspect of paganism. It consists of masculine generosity. If we think back on the hunter-gatherers, we can divide the hunting to the masculine and the gathering to the feminine attributes of the human nature. Now, in hunting, a male would go off and test himself against nature. If he succeeded, he would bring back his kill to the tribe and share it. Thusly, his reputation would be enhanced, and if he did this consistently, he would earn the benefits of this reputation among the feminine as a male that was a good provider and generous to boot, because that generosity is a fundamental part of the potlatch ritual, because it is a ritual. All culture is collective rituals passed down from generation to generation. By contrast, modernity is characterized by a Afro-Asiatic miserliness, a feminine demeanor of gathering and preserving and hoarding. I first experienced this modern form of potlatch in Greece when I moved there in my early teens, and I was surprised by the behavior of the males there. Whenever we went out to a cafeteria or a bar with a group of males, if somebody saw us and knew one of the members of our group, he would send over whatever we were drinking or eating. He would treat us, in other words. If he could afford it, he would treat the entire table. If he did not, he would only treat his friend, and he would expect at a later date, not on the same date, but at a later time, that his friend would reciprocate in kind. This was the ritual, this was the culture back then. This is what is called the Mediterranean hospitality. It is the aspect of generosity, that is expunging excess energies as indication that you could replenish them at will. That's what the ritual entails. What it symbolizes, is that the male, what he's saying is that he could waste all this energy giving it away, feeding the entire troop, reinforcing his relationship with other members of the tribe, because he has confidence that he could replenish these energies. The ritual was based on an unspoken trust of reciprocity. That is, the friend that treated his friend, even though he wasn't in the same table, but especially if he was on the same table. That's why they fight over the bill still in those parts of the world. They fight over who's going to pay. It's part of this potlatch tradition, going back to pagan times, to primordial times. So it was based on trust, an unspoken agreement that the treatment offered, the gift offered, would be reciprocated at a later time, either in kind or in another form. This was the unspoken agreement that is still part of the Mediterranean culture. For instance, when a man is celebrating his birthday or his name day or the birth of his child or whatever he is celebrating, he is expected to be the one who gives gifts to his relatives, to his friends, even to strangers. The more generous he is, the more his reputation increases, benefits. This is not the case in the Americanized West, governed by the Abrahamic spiritual tradition, going back to Afro-Asiatic culture, the miserly, feminine culture. In Americanism, it is the birthday boy or girl who receives affirmations from his friends, relatives, that he belongs, that he is appreciated. That's what the gift giving signifies. In other words, it is the reverse of the Mediterranean, the more masculine tradition. And this is the difference between hunting and gathering. The hunter goes off to find what he is seeking, whereas the gatherer waits for the environment, for Mother Nature, to give him what he is looking for. And this miserly psychology can go to extremes. We've heard of hoarding that reaches the levels of psychosis, or the idea of greed. You know how greed is idealized in Americanism. Greed is to the mind what gluttony is to the body. So both greed and gluttony are part of the American spirit, the American culture, if you want to call it that, because it is connected with Abrahamism. And Abrahamism is an Afro-Asiatic spirituality, not a European spirituality. So the miser, he takes advantage of other people's generosity. He feels clever when he receives, thinking that the other person that gives him a gift or treats him, that he will reciprocate. But he considers himself clever because what he conceals is that he doesn't intend to reciprocate, and he thinks this is a clever way. This is part of his cleverness, you know. He is a genius because he does not reciprocate. He only takes. He takes and he hoards and he accumulates. He accumulates wealth. He accumulates things. Things become like a womb, a material womb within which he conceals himself, he thinks. He shelters himself against the reality. But then eventually he realizes that things do not suffice. So what he does is he negates everything he practiced in the past. He denounces it, even himself. He doesn't even want to acknowledge himself as the physical, the tangible, because the tangible material things that he's gathered did not suffice to fulfill him. So he denounces everything that is tangible and physical, including his physical body. This is why they hate the body, because the body reminds them of what they are, the limits of what they are. So he goes from hoarding into denying the relevance of his physical presence. He imagines himself to be an incorporeal being, an incorporeal spirit, just like every other. This is how he deals with his shame. He finds in the spiritualization, the abstraction of himself, a method of equality, of immersing himself in the cosmic abstraction, the cosmic spirit. And that's exactly what Abrahamism offers, as I've noted many times, because this is part of the Jesus narrative, the Jesus passion. The body is sacrificed, crucified, and Jesus and mankind with him is reborn as a pure idea, as pure abstraction, immaterial, incorporeal. It is the next step from the miserly spirit towards this denouncing of the physical. I mean, it's the logical step of the coward, of the self-hating idiot who believes at first when he's young that he can compensate for what he believes he lacks. When he looks in the mirror, he sees something that he does not like. And he says to himself, that's not all I am. I can be better than this. I am better than this already. Not I can be better, but I am already better. So at first he starts accumulating wealth and accumulating things. And he thinks this will compensate for his inferiority. This will lead him to like himself. But it fails. And as a consequence, he takes the next step where he rejects the tangible, the apparent altogether. He says to himself that since the material failed to satisfy him, to compensate for what he believed he lacked, that by denouncing the self altogether, he could finally find equity in the abstraction of self, in abstraction itself. By immersing himself in an abstract identity, he disappears, he believes, within the abstraction. His inferiority becomes part of a uniformity. Yeah, as I've noted, money is for modern man, modern atheist, secular man, Homo Americanus. Money is his new messiah. With money, he believes he could escape, he can find salvation from his past, from his impoverished inheritance, genetic and otherwise. But this fails. It always fails. That's why you see these actors that become rich overnight. They eventually go insane. They turn to drugs because everything they thought was going to give them, bring them joy and happiness and self-esteem failed. They see that it's vacuous, that it was a pipe dream, that it was all in their head. They had overestimated their objectives because they were unrealistic, because the problem wasn't out there, it was inside of them. So they turn to the pleasure principle, distractions, hedonism. They become gluttonous. They turn to alcohol, they turn to drugs, they turn to sex, to escape, to comfort themselves, to save themselves from themselves. It's part of existence. There is no perfection. There is no absolute. In other words, there is no immutable, indivisible thing. There is no oneness. Everything is process. Everything is imperfect. Again, all value judgments require an objective. And in this case, the objective of the coward, of the imbecile, of the weakling, is absolution. And that's why he is constantly disappointed. He feels that he's constantly unfulfilled. He is constantly dissatisfied with what he can get. So he hoards, he collects, seeking fulfillment, seeking absolution, seeking a final state of satiation, of final gratification. But how can you find such satiation by consuming imperfect beings? Ouroboros, animals consuming animals, life consuming life. The imperfect consuming the imperfect. The incomplete consuming the incomplete. This cannot lead to perfection. This ought not to lead to perfection, because that would mean the end of existence itself. Ironically, it is the existence of chaos that makes life possible, and also makes life mortal, and makes life suffer, because suffering is the experience of existing. And by suffering I mean a high degree of need, of stress, caused by unsatisfied needs, ungratified desires. As I've explained in my other monologue, I use the term need and desire to differentiate between the body and the mind and how they experience existence. Need is a product of lack, caused by constant flux, by constant interactivity, in other words, by existence. Because in order to maintain itself, a living being has to endure temporal, spatial attrition. Desire is another byproduct, is another issue. It's a byproduct of the successful satisfaction of needs, creating momentary excess. This excess is what Nietzsche focused upon when he divided the psychology of man between Dionysian and Apollonian. This excess, this overflowing he spoke about, it was the desire he was speaking about, a consequence of successful, like I said, satisfaction of needs. Consistent satisfaction of needs creates excess energies. The brain, encased within the human skull, does not experience this attrition directly, but it experiences indirectly. It is a energy hungry organ, the brain, and the body feeds it these energies. So for the brain, these energies are superfluous and excessive, the product of excess, physical excess, again caused by the successful satisfaction of physical needs. And need is how the organism, life form, experiences the attrition of its energies due to constant interactivity or existence itself. But again, if we change our perspective, then we can say that the existence, since everything is energy, is full of energy and overflowing, I guess you could say. But not all energies are useful to life. Life requires certain energies, certain patterns, and its organic constitution determines which energies it wants, it needs to replenish the ones it is losing. So even among a cosmic energy flow, a life can feel like it is losing energies. Like a man lost at sea could be thirsty, but could not drink from the ocean, because if he did, he would die. It's the same thing with life. Amidst all this energy, it needs specific kinds of energy, so it could feel this lack of those specific kinds of energies. And it feels this lack as need. And if these needs remain unsatisfied, they become what he calls suffering, pain. And the miser knows this intuitively. So, like a squirrel, every time he comes across energies, wealth that is given to him, that is accessible to him, that is available to him, he collects it all. He's gluttonous. He wants to take it all for himself, to hide it away so that others do not take from it. So he becomes a hoarder. And this hoarding expresses his innate spirit as someone who feels insecure that he cannot replenish these energies. He cannot find replacement for these energies. So whenever he finds them, he must hoard them and not give any away. So he becomes more feminine, because the feminine becomes dependent on the collective. That's why it develops a specific kind of psychology in regards to this matter. Her dependence on the group is a fundamental aspect of the feminine psyche, and the hoarder, especially when he's male, is really expressing his emasculation, his effete essence, the fact that he feels insecure, that he's not a good hunter, that he cannot go out there and find what he lacks. He cannot provide at will and share what he finds. Sharing for him is anathema. So he must exploit, take advantage of those who do share, who are generous. And of course, this boomerangs eventually. You can only exploit others for so long. Because in the case of the feminine does give something in return. She gives the birth of a child. So the male does want to be exploited, so to speak, in this case, because he benefits from it. Whereas if it's a man, a male, with this attitude, what does he have to offer in return? This is the question. If he has nothing to offer in return, then eventually he will be cut off. There is no reciprocity based on trust any longer. He is a user, a userer. So he loses respect, because, like I said, respect is about not wanting to lose something. Why do we respect a mentor? Because we don't want to lose his support, his teaching. Why do we respect our parents? Because we don't want to lose their love, their support, their presence, their care. Why do we respect our friends? Because for the same reason, because they give something to us we don't want to lose. There's no such thing as love with no strings. That's a bullshit concept. Another byproduct of Abrahamism. There is no love without a benefit. Even when you give to a homeless person on the street 25 cents, you gain something from it. There's always something gained from something given. The idea of taking eventually will backfire if there's no balance, if there's no reciprocity. So to return to my example about the Mediterranean culture, in Greece, if a friend, let's say, treats you to a bottle of expensive wine, let's say, he doesn't expect you to reciprocate in kind, but to reciprocate something that's on your level of your income level. It's the gesture of returning a gift given, not of equal value, just the returning as a show of appreciation. But if the friend knows that the other person can afford to reciprocate in kind the same value, and he doesn't do this consecutively, what does this show? It shows exploitation. It shows that this friend doesn't really appreciate his friendship with you, his bond with you, to the same degree you have. Because the gift represents how much you appreciate the other person. If he can't afford it, you can understand that he can't reciprocate of equal value. But if he can, and he doesn't, that means something else is going on. And this is true in any context, not only in material things, but emotional things. When you offer somebody trust and he doesn't reciprocate with the same amount of trust, then that also shows something. Something given must be returned in kind, or as much as you can afford. Now, the opposite can also be destructive. I know people who are generous beyond their means. They are generous to an extreme. They are generous even though they can't afford to be so generous. They make themselves victims in this case. So even here, the pan metron ariston, the concept of balance must be applied. And Potlatch displays the generosity is often excessive, but I don't think it's consistent. It's excessive as a display, a momentary display. The individual cannot be generous beyond his means. It is a signaling to the other, to the tribe, to his neighbors, to his family, to his friends, how much he appreciates them, how much he can waste without suffering the consequences. And this is the key, without suffering the consequences, because if he wastes more than he can endure, then that's crazy. That's insanity, and it does not last. And of course, it all has to do with reputation and how you are remembered. Remembrance is what is at stake here. Because we are mortal beings, our time on this earth is limited. And remembrance is how we prolong our impact on this earth. Because we all want to have some kind of impact. That's why we have kids. Because DNA is a form of extending our memories. Because genes are memories. So the way we are recollected is important. And we have control of this only while we are alive. Once we die, we have no control. We relinquish control over our memory, or the memories we created in others. This is why it's important. Not only what kind of memories we create in others, but among whom we create these memories, because You can become a victim if you want to be liked and recalled positively by everybody. There's a saying that if everybody likes you, then you're doing something wrong. And if everybody hates you, you're doing something wrong. Or it's the opposite, actually. If everybody hates you, as the saying goes, then you're definitely doing something wrong. And if everybody likes you, you're also doing something wrong. So the goal here is to be recollected among the people you appreciate or you value in a positive way. That's why in the Bible, Jesus tells his apostles that if two or more of you are gathered in my name, then I am present. Because by recollecting somebody's name, you conjure him up as if he exists, as if he is still present. And the manner in which you conjure him up determines is determined by how you've experienced him while he was alive. This is why in Greece, when you go to a funeral, you tell the relatives of the deceased that may you live so you can remember him. That's what you say. Because by remembering him, it's as if he's still alive. And this, of course, connects us to the first came the word, logos. Logos becomes a magical force that can provide the illusion of immortality, because words last longer than actions. And words are the tool of the magian, the magician, the magic user, the feminine. Words can break bones. No, they say that, we used to say that sticks and stones can break my bones, but words can never hurt me. Well, that's not true. Words continuously hurt you because you remember them. In memory, they hurt you over and over again, more than actions do. Actions occur in an instant and then you heal, you forget. But words, when you speak words, hurtful words, then they have the capacity to hurt the other continuously through memory, through recollection. And words are the tools of the weakling, unable to use physical force, physical power. All he has are words to undermine, to subvert, to emasculate, to hurt, to avenge. So when you hear about magic, don't be fooled. There's nothing there. There's nothing fantastic about it. It's a psychosomatic effect caused by words, by semiotics. Words on paper or oral words. This is the difference between the Magian, the Afro-Asiatic, and the Faustian, the Indo-European masculine cultures. Feminine and masculine. The Hellenic and the Judaic worldviews. You can't mix oil and vinegar. Even though you can mix the masculine and the feminine, you can't mix oil and vinegar. These cultures are incompatible. But of course, we now live in a Judaized, Americanized world in the West, in a feminized West. This is what I mean by feminization of man. I mean, when I say Americanism, I mean feminized. The spirit of masculine generosity, trying to prove its worthiness, and feminine miserliness, full of expectations and demands and justifications. One always accepting responsibility, the other constantly projecting its responsibilities upon others, one standing forth as himself, the other standing behind a proxy, wearing masks, manipulating the other's generosity, exploiting the other's compassion, the other's sympathy, the other's paternal instincts. This is what it's at work here. Even when it comes to something as trite as who gets to treat and who accepts treatment. It's a difference between physical and psychological dependence and physical and psychological independence. Men and women are a combination of feminine and masculine traits, as Weininger explained. We are not all absolutely masculine or absolutely feminine, but we are within a range that determines our reproductive potentials. But that's another issue. So when I speak of the masculine of the feminine, I don't mean biological females or biological males, since both are amalgamations, a synthesis. And of course, the synthesis determines performance. And just like individual organisms, entire civilizations can be characterized similarly as a combination of masculine and feminine traits. We are now living in the age of the feminine, at least in what we call the West, the American Dominion. The American Dominion has been completely emasculated, feminized. Don't let the machismo overcompensations fool you. That's not masculinity. That's an indication of how emasculated the West has become. This machismo is an overcompensation.